Montana Territory, 1875. Jane Zimmerman clutched her tattered carpetbag as the stagecoach rumbled into Copper Creek. The journey from Philadelphia had taken everything she had, her savings, her strength, and nearly her courage. Through the dust-coated window, wooden storefronts and hitching posts appeared, a world entirely foreign to her former life as a seamstress. Her pulse quickened as the coach slowed. "Copper Creek," the driver announced, his voice carrying over the creak of leather and jangle of harness. Jane smoothed her wrinkled blue traveling dress, keenly aware of its shabby appearance after the long journey. 22 years old, and traveling alone to marry a man she'd never met. What would her parents think if they were still alive? She touched the locket at her throat, their only legacy besides the skills of her needle. The coach lurched to a stop. Jane waited while the other passengers descended before gathering her courage and stepping down. The late afternoon sun beat upon her chestnut hair, loosened from its pins during the rough journey. She squinted, searching the small crowd for the man who had answered her advertisement in the matrimonial news. No one stepped forward. "Miss Zimmerman?" The station master approached, removing his hat. "Got a message for you." Jane's heart sank as she read the hastily scrawled note. "Miss Zimmerman, regret to inform you our arrangement cannot proceed. Family circumstances changed. Return fare enclosed. H. Foster." The station master cleared his throat. "Stage heads back east tomorrow noon." Jane stared at the paper, the black letters swimming before her eyes. After everything, the letters exchanged over 6 months, the promises made, the journey undertaken, he had simply changed his mind. And she was expected to turn around and go, where? There was nothing left for her in Philadelphia. "Is there a boarding house, sir?" she asked, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I need to consider my options." The boarding house proved neat but sparse. From her window, Jane watched the town's evening routines unfold as she contemplated her predicament. The return fare would last perhaps a week if she was frugal. But then what? She had no family, few connections back east, and had gambled everything on this new beginning. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Peterson, the boarding house proprietress, a stout woman with kind eyes. "Thought you might want some supper, dear," she said, offering a tray. "And perhaps some advice." Over a simple meal of stew and biscuits, Jane explained her situation. Mrs. Peterson clicked her tongue sympathetically. "That Hayes Foster, I wondered about him. Not the first time he's done this, you know. Gets cold feet every time." "You mean he's advertised for a bride 3 times now. Always finds a reason to back out when they arrive." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. "But you needn't despair. Copper Creek has plenty who'd value a young woman with skills. What can you do, besides being pretty?" "I'm a seamstress," Jane answered. "I worked for one of Philadelphia's finest dressmakers." Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up. "Well now, that's something we sorely need. Mrs. Davis does what she can, but she's nearly blind now." For the first time since arriving, Jane felt a flicker of hope. "Do you think there might be work for me?" "I'd bet on it." "And who knows," Mrs. Peterson added with a wink, "you might find a better husband than Hayes Foster anyway." The next morning, Jane walked to the town's only dress shop. The bell tinkled as she entered, and an elderly woman peered up from her seat by the window. "Hello? Who's there?" Mrs. Davis squinted. "Jane Zimmerman, ma'am. I'm a seamstress from Philadelphia. Mrs. Peterson suggested I might speak with you about work." The old woman's face brightened. "The Lord provides. I was just praying for help yesterday. My eyes aren't what they used to be." Within an hour, Jane had demonstrated her skill with a needle, repairing a torn wedding gown that had defeated Mrs. Davis's failing eyesight. By noon, she had not only secured employment, but also arranged to rent the small room behind the shop. "It's not much," Mrs. Davis apologized, showing her the space. "But it's clean and yours if you want it." As Jane moved her meager belongings into her new quarters that afternoon, she felt both relief and uncertainty. She had avoided immediate disaster, but knew nothing of her new home. Who was this Hayes Foster who had summoned and rejected her? Would the townspeople accept an abandoned mail-order bride? She was arranging her sewing notions when the shop bell rang. Mrs. Davis had gone home for the afternoon, leaving Jane to mind the store. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood in the doorway, holding the hand of a small girl about 5 years old. His hat was off, revealing thick honey-brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. Clean-shaven with sun-bronzed skin, He couldn't have been more than 25. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned face, registered surprise at seeing Jane. "Pardon me," he said. "I was looking for Mrs. Davis." "She's gone home for the day," Jane replied, suddenly conscious of her work apron and loose hair. "I'm Jane Zimmerman. I'm working for her now." The man nodded. "Henry Fletcher. This is my daughter, Lily." The little girl peered from behind her father's leg, her blonde curls framing a delicate face that bore a striking resemblance to Henry's. Her wide blue eyes studied Jane with unabashed curiosity. "We need a dress for Lily," Henry explained, his voice deep but gentle. "For the Founders' Day celebration next month." Jane smiled at the child. "Hello, Lily. Would you like to look at some fabric for your new dress?" Lily nodded shyly but didn't move from her father's side. "She's a bit quiet with strangers," Henry said apologetically. "Her mother passed when she was just 2. "I'm sorry," Jane replied softly. She knelt to Lily's level. "Would you like to see something special?" From her pocket, Jane produced a small cloth doll she had made during her journey west. It was a simple thing, just scraps of fabric and thread, but crafted with care. "This is Miss Penny," Jane said, offering the doll. "She traveled all the way from Philadelphia with me." Lily's eyes widened. She looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly, then reached for the doll. "What do you say, Lily?" Henry prompted. "Thank you," came the whispered response. As Jane measured Lily for her dress, the child gradually warmed to her, even giggling when Jane pretended to be tangled in the measuring tape. Henry watched with evident pleasure at his daughter's animation. "You're good with her," he observed. "Most folks don't know how to break through her shell." Jane smiled. Children usually respond well when treated as people rather than decorations. Henry's eyebrow raised, and the corner of his mouth turned up. "Not a common view. I was an orphan myself by 12, Jane explained, securing the last measurement. "I know what it's like to be spoken about rather than to." Something shifted in Henry's expression, a new interest, perhaps even respect. "Will you be staying in Copper Creek long, Miss Zimmerman?" The question brought Jane's predicament back into sharp focus. "I believe so. I've taken the position with Mrs. Davis." She didn't mention being a jilted mail-order bride. Something in her wanted this handsome stranger to think better of her than that. "Then we'll likely see you at church on Sunday," Henry said. "Come along, Lily. We need to let Miss Zimmerman get back to work." As they turned to leave, Lily looked back at Jane. "Can Miss Penny stay with me?" Jane hesitated only a moment. "Of course she can." The smile that lit the child's face was worth far more than the simple doll. After they left, Jane found herself thinking of the gentle father and his quiet daughter. There was something about Henry Fletcher, a kindness in his eyes, a tenderness in how he treated his child, that stirred feelings she thought long buried. But she quickly dismissed such thoughts. She was here to build a new life, not to pine after the first handsome man she met. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Word spread quickly that Copper Creek had acquired a skilled seamstress, and orders flowed into the shop. Jane worked long hours, grateful for the distraction and the growing savings in her tin box. She saw Henry and Lily at church each Sunday, exchanging polite greetings, but nothing more. The little girl always had Miss Penny clutched in her small hand, which touched Jane deeply. One evening as Jane was closing the shop, Sheriff Miller appeared at the door. "Evening, Miss Zimmerman. Got a minute?" Jane invited him in, wondering what could bring the law to her door. "Nothing to worry about," he assured her, seeing her concerned expression. "Just thought you should know. Hayes Foster's been telling folks some unkind things about why you stayed in town." Jane's cheeks flushed. "What sort of things?" "Claiming you misrepresented yourself in your letters. Says that's why he changed his mind." "That's not true," Jane protested. "I was completely honest in all our correspondence." The sheriff nodded. "I figured as much. Foster's got a reputation for this sort of thing. But I wanted you to hear it from me before the gossip reached you some other way." After he left, Jane sank onto her stool, fighting tears. Just when she was finding her footing, this threat to her reputation emerged. In a small town like Copper Creek, reputation was everything. The following day brought unexpected support. Mrs. Peterson arrived with 3 other women from the Church Ladies' Auxiliary. "We've come to order new dresses," announced Mrs. White, the banker's wife, "for the Founders' Day celebration." As Jane measured and consulted on fabrics and styles, Mrs. Peterson winked at her. "We know what Hayes Foster's been saying, dear. Don't you worry. We've set the record straight." That Sunday after church, Henry approached Jane as she was speaking with Mrs. Davis. "Miss Zimmerman, I wonder if you might join Lily and me for dinner?" he asked, his hat in his hands. "She's been asking about you, and I've got a stew that needs eating." Jane glanced at Mrs. Davis, who smiled encouragingly. "That would be lovely, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you." Henry's ranch lay 3 miles outside town, a modest spread with a sturdy log house, barn, and corral. As they approached in his wagon, Jane noted the careful maintenance of the property. Flower beds lined the path to the house, and curtains hung in the windows. "It's not much," Henry said, following her gaze, "but it's home." Inside, the house was simply but comfortably furnished. A woman in her 60s rose from her seat by the fire. "Miss Zimmerman, this is Mrs. Quinn. She helps with Lily and the house 3 days a week." The older woman nodded politely but studied Jane with undisguised curiosity. After dinner, a surprisingly good stew with fresh bread, Mrs. Quinn departed, and Lily asked Jane to help put Miss Penny to bed. The child's room was small but lovingly arranged, with a handmade quilt and small shelf of books. As Jane tucked the doll beside Lily, the little girl looked up with serious eyes. "Papa says you make pretty dresses." Jane smiled. "I try to. Mama wore pretty dresses. I don't remember, but Papa told me." Jane's heart constricted at the simple statement. "I'm sure she did. Papa has a picture. Want to see?" Before Jane could answer, Lily was out of bed, retrieving a small daguerreotype from her dresser. The woman in the image was lovely, fair-haired like Lily, with the same delicate features. "She was beautiful," Jane said sincerely. Lily nodded solemnly. "Papa says I look like her." "You do," Jane agreed. "Now, time for sleep." After Lily was settled, Jane joined Henry on the porch. The evening air carried the scent of pine and distant rain. "She seems happy," Jane observed. Henry nodded. "She is, mostly. But she feels the absence of her mother, especially as she gets older. It can't be easy, raising her alone. Mrs. Quinn helps, and my sister visits when she can from Bozeman." Henry paused. "May I ask you something personal, Miss Zimmerman?" Jane tensed slightly, but nodded. "Is it true you came to marry Hayes Foster?" The direct question startled her. "Ah, yes. How did you know?" "It's a small town," Henry replied. "And Foster has a reputation." Jane looked away. "Then you know he changed his mind when I arrived." "His loss," Henry said simply. The unexpected comment brought Jane's eyes back to his face. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're kind to say so." "It's not kindness, just truth." Henry shifted in his chair. "Foster's a fool. Always has been." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before Henry spoke again. "Lily's taken to you. She doesn't warm to people easily. She's a special child." "Yes." Henry seemed to be weighing his next words carefully. Would you consider coming out here once a week? To spend time with her?" "I'd pay you, of course." Jane was surprised by the request. "I don't need payment to spend time with Lily." "But why?" Henry looked toward the darkening hills. "She needs a woman's influence. Things I can't teach her." He paused. "And she likes you." "I'd be happy to," Jane said softly. As Henry drove her back to town, questions whirled in Jane's mind. Was his interest purely for Lily's benefit? And why did she find herself hoping it might be more? The weeks leading to the Founders' Day celebration were the busiest Jane had ever known. Between the regular work at the shop and the special orders for the celebration, she barely had time to breathe. Yet she faithfully visited the Fletcher ranch each Saturday, spending hours with Lily, teaching her simple needlework, reading stories, and occasionally helping with household tasks Henry struggled with, like mending and curtain hanging. She tried not to notice how her heart quickened when Henry was nearby, or how his gaze seemed to linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Such thoughts led nowhere productive. He was being kind to a newcomer, grateful for her influence on his daughter. Nothing more. 3 days before the celebration, Jane was working late to finish Lily's dress when the shop door opened. Hayes Foster stood there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Jane stiffened. "Mr. Foster, the shop is closed." "I know." He shifted his weight. "I came to apologize." Jane set down her work. "For which part? Abandoning me upon arrival or spreading falsehoods about me afterward?" Hayes winced. "Both. I was wrong." "Why the change of heart?" "Truth is, I got scared." He twisted his hat brim. "Each time a bride arrives, I panic. Think I'm not ready." "Then perhaps you should stop advertising for brides," Jane suggested coolly. Fair point. Hayes cleared his throat. Thing is, seeing you around town these past weeks, how you've made a place for yourself, it got me thinking I made a mistake. Jane raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting we revisit our arrangement? If you'd consider it. Jane studied the man before her. He was handsome enough, well established as the town's feed store owner. Once, she had been willing to marry him sight unseen. I'm sorry, Mr. Foster, but no. You had your chance. Hayes looked genuinely disappointed. Is there someone else? The question caught her off guard. Was there? Images of Henry's kind eyes and Lily's sweet smile flashed in her mind. That's not your concern, she replied. Good evening, Mr. Foster. After he left, Jane returned to her sewing, but her thoughts remained troubled. Hayes's question had forced her to confront feelings she'd been avoiding. She had grown deeply attached to both Henry and Lily Fletcher. But Henry had never indicated any romantic interest, had he? The night of the Founders' Day celebration arrived clear and warm. The town square blazed with lanterns, and a platform had been erected for dancing. Jane wore her best dress, a deep green that complemented her chestnut hair, which she'd arranged in an elaborate style learned in Philadelphia. Mrs. Davis exclaimed when she saw her. My dear, you'll have every bachelor in 3 counties at your feet tonight. Jane blushed. I just want to enjoy the celebration. Her first sight of Lily in the dress she'd made brought tears to her eyes. The child twirled in the pale blue creation, ribbons flying. It's the prettiest dress ever, Lily declared. Henry stood nearby, watching his daughter with evident pride. When he turned to Jane, his expression softened. You look beautiful, he said quietly. Before Jane could respond, Lily grabbed her hand. Come dance with me and Papa. The evening passed in a whirl of music and laughter. Jane danced with several townsmen, but found her gaze constantly returning to Henry, who seemed to be watching her as well. When Hayes Foster approached for a dance, she politely declined, noticing with secret pleasure how Henry's expression darkened at Foster's arrival. As the celebration wound down, Henry found Jane sitting alone while Lily dozed on a nearby bench. Would you walk with me? He asked, offering his arm. They strolled to the edge of the square, where the lantern light faded into moonlit shadow. Lily's exhausted but happy, Jane observed. Thanks to you. Henry hesitated. Jane, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart began to race at his use of her given name. Yes. These past weeks, having you in our lives, it's been wonderful. For both of us. Jane held her breath, afraid to hope. I know it's soon, and you came here with other expectations, but Henry broke off, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Before he could continue, a commotion rose from the dance platform. The mayor was calling for attention. Folks, before we end our celebration, we have a special announcement. Our own Hayes Foster has generously donated funds for a new schoolhouse. Applause erupted. Henry's jaw tightened. We should get back, he said, his previous words abandoned. Jane nodded, disappointment washing over her. The moment was lost. The following week brought relentless rain, turning Copper Creek streets to mud and keeping customers from the shop. Jane used the time to catch up on backlogged orders, but found herself constantly distracted, replaying that interrupted moment with Henry. What had he been about to say? And why hadn't he resumed the conversation during their ride home that night? On Saturday, the rain finally stopped. Jane prepared for her weekly visit to the Fletcher ranch, only to receive a note from Henry. Miss Zimmerman, Lily has a slight fever. Best postpone your visit until next week. Fletcher. The formal tone stung after the intimacy they'd begun to share. Jane spent a restless day reorganizing the shop, trying not to worry about Lily or overthink Henry's coolness. Sunday morning dawned clear. Jane dressed carefully for church, hoping to see the Fletchers and inquire about Lily's health. But their usual pew remained empty. After the service, Jane approached Mrs. Quinn. How is Lily feeling? Better today, the older woman replied. Henry's keeping her home as a precaution. I'm glad it's nothing serious. Mrs. Quinn gave Jane an appraising look. He's a good father. Careful man in all things, sometimes too careful. What do you mean? The older woman sighed. Lost his wife in childbirth. Hit him hard. Makes him cautious about his heart. She patted Jane's arm. Just needs time, dear. Jane pondered these words as she walked back to her quarters. Was Mrs. Quinn suggesting Henry had feelings for her? And if so, why had he withdrawn? Monday afternoon, the shop bell jangled, and Jane looked up from her work to find Lily Fletcher standing in the doorway, Miss Penny clutched in her hand. "Lily, should you be out of bed?" Jane hurried toward the child. "I'm all better," Lily announced. "And I needed to see you." Jane knelt before her. "Where's your father?" "At the bank. He doesn't know I'm here." Lily's expression turned serious. "Are you mad at Papa?" The question startled Jane. "Of course not. Why would you think that? He's sad. And he didn't take me to see you on Saturday." "You were sick, sweetheart." Lily shook her head. "Not very sick. Papa said we needed to give you space." Jane frowned. "Give me space? Why?" "Because of Mr. Foster. Papa says he saw you talking at the celebration, and Mr. Foster told everyone at the feed store that you're going to marry him after all." Jane gasped. "What? That's absolutely not true." "I told Papa it wasn't true," Lily said triumphantly. "I said you wouldn't marry Mr. Foster because you like us better." Despite her distress, Jane had to smile at the child's logic. "You're right about that. I do like you better." Lily's face lit up. "I knew it. Will you tell Papa?" "He won't believe me." "Lily Fletcher." Henry's voice came from the doorway, his expression a mixture of relief and embarrassment. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Lily spun around. "Papa, I found Miss Jane, and she says she likes us better than Mr. Foster." Henry's cheeks reddened. "Lily, that's enough. Apologize to Miss Zimmerman for bothering her." "She's not bothering me," Jane said softly. She stood, meeting Henry's eyes. "And she's right. I do like you both better than Mr. Foster." A tense silence filled the shop. "Lily, wait outside for a moment," Henry finally said. "I need to speak with Miss Zimmerman." Once the child stepped out, Henry removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I apologize for my daughter's behavior, and for believing Foster's boasting." "Why didn't you just ask me?" Jane questioned. "I had no right to," Henry replied. "Your arrangements are your own business." "But you were going to ask me something at the celebration," Jane pressed. "Before the mayor's announcement." Henry looked away. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." His eyes returned to hers, vulnerability evident in their blue depths. "I was going to ask if you might consider becoming part of our family. Properly, I mean." Jane's heart soared, but uncertainty lingered. "Because Lily needs a mother?" "That's part of it," Henry admitted. "But mostly because I've fallen in love with you, Jane Zimmerman. I didn't expect to, didn't think my heart had room after losing Sarah. But there it is." Jane moved closer. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I was working up the courage. Then I saw you with Foster, heard him claiming you'd reconciled." Henry shook his head. "I thought I'd misread everything between us." "You didn't," Jane said softly. "I came to Copper Creek looking for a new life, a place to belong. I found it, with you and Lily." Henry's expression transformed, hope replacing doubt. "Are you saying—" The shop door burst open, and Lily peered in. "Papa, are you asking Miss Jane to be my mommy yet?" Henry laughed, tension breaking. "I'm trying to, if you'd give me a moment." Lily bounced with excitement. "Please say yes, Miss Jane. I already asked her if she wanted to be my mommy, and she smiled really big." Jane looked at Henry in surprise. "When did this happen?" 2 weeks ago," Lily answered matter-of-factly. "When you were teaching me to sew. I whispered it, but you didn't hear me." "I think she's hearing you now," Henry said, his eyes never leaving Jane's face. "What do you say, Jane? I know it's soon, but life out here teaches you not to waste time when you find something precious." Jane felt tears welling. "I say yes, to both of you." Henry closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I don't have a ring yet." "I don't need one," Jane interrupted. "Just you and Lily." As Henry's lips met hers in a gentle first kiss, Lily clapped her hands. "Does this mean Miss Jane is my mommy now?" Henry smiled against Jane's mouth. "Soon, sweetheart. Very soon." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church, with most of Copper Creek in attendance. Jane wore a dress of ivory silk she'd made herself, with Lily proudly serving as flower girl in a matching creation. As they exchanged vows, Jane marveled at how her journey had unfolded. She had arrived as an unwanted mail-order bride and found instead a love she hadn't been seeking. After the ceremony, as guests gathered for the celebration at the town hall, Hayes Foster approached the couple. "Congratulations," he said, extending his hand to Henry. "You're a fortunate man, Fletcher." "I know it," Henry replied, his arm protectively around Jane's waist. Foster turned to Jane. "I truly am sorry for how I treated you, Mrs. Fletcher. I hope you can forgive me." Jane smiled, feeling no rancor on this joyful day. I already have, Mr. Foster. In fact, I should thank you. Thank me. Foster looked puzzled. If you hadn't changed your mind, I might never have found my true home. Later that evening, as Henry carried a sleeping Lily into their house, now Jane's home as well, he paused on the porch. Welcome home, Mrs. Fletcher, he said, his voice rich with emotion. Jane touched his cheek tenderly. I've been searching for home my entire life. I never expected to find it in a place I wasn't wanted. Henry kissed her softly. You were always wanted here. We just didn't know to look for you until you arrived. As moonlight bathed the porch of the Fletcher ranch, Jane knew with absolute certainty that her journey had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Not as a mail-order bride to a stranger, but as the chosen wife of a man who loved her and the mother of a little girl who had whispered the question that changed everything. Can you be my mommy? The answer, Jane knew, had always been yes.